All right, welcome to the deep dive. We're all about taking these kind of complex things and making them, well, not so complex.
Yeah, kind of like, giving you the cheat sheet, so to speak.
Exactly. And today's cheat sheet is for Text11. It's this article all about an issue that's becoming a real pain for businesses.
A growing pain, you could say. And a lot of you sent this our way, and we heard you. We're gonna break this down step by step.
So you can really get it.
Yeah, we'll look at the main ideas, how the sentences are structured, those tricky words, and even how to tackle questions about this. Especially if you're prepping for those master's exams.
Perfect. So Text11. It starts off with this line, "It never rains, but it pours."
Classic saying.
Right. You've probably heard it before. Basically, it means when it rains, it downpours, or when one thing goes wrong.
A whole bunch of things go wrong.
Exactly, like a domino effect. So, keeping that in mind, what new problem does this article say is popping up, just as companies think they've solved other issues?
Well, the very next part of that sentence says, just as bosses and boards have finally sorted out their worst accounting and compliance troubles and improved their feeble corporation governance, a new problem threatens to earn them, especially in America. The sort of nasty headlines that inevitably lead to heads rolling in the executive suite. Data insecurity.
Whoa, okay, lots to unpack there.
Right, but the new problem, it's right there at the end. Data insecurity.
So it's like you finally fix that leaky pipe in your kitchen, and then boom, the bathroom sink explodes.
That's a good way to put it. The article is saying that company leaders feel like they've finally gotten on top of stuff like keeping their financial records straight. That's the accounting part.
Making sure they're following all the rules, the compliance.
Right, and even making sure their companies are being run well, even if it wasn't so great before what they call corporation governance. They're feeling good, and then bam, this new worry hits them. Data insecurity.
Which basically means?
Not keeping their digital information safe.
Right.
Not protecting it well enough.
Got it.
Right.
And the article doesn't just, talk about this generally. It uses real examples.
Oh, yeah, they name names. Time Warner, a big defense contractor, even UC Berkeley, they all had data slip-ups.
Showing that this isn't just a small business problem, it's hitting everyone.
Yeah.
And, I feel like the article is building up to this idea that maybe
there should be some kind of standard way for companies to protect data. Like
the rules they have for how they handle money.
Yeah.
GAAP, right.
Exactly. Generally accepted accounting principles.
And they're kind of hinting that we need something similar for data security.
And the author seems genuinely surprised that this isn't already a huge thing. Like, why aren't all companies freaking out about this? And they also talk about how the US and Europe deal with data breaches differently, legally, I mean.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and that adds another layer of complexity, especially for American companies.
Okay, let's dive into the actual structure of some of these sentences because, man, are they dense.
Oh, yeah. The author likes to pack a lot in.
Let's revisit that first one. It never rains, but it pours. Just as bosses and boards have finally sorted out their worst accounting and compliance troubles and improved their feeble corporation governance, a new problem threatens to earn them, especially in America. The sort of nasty headlines that inevitably lead to heads rolling in the executive suite. Data insecurity. Wow, okay, breathe.
That's a mouthful.
We know the first part, it never rains, but it pours. Means problems like to show up together.
Then we've got this. Just as bosses and boards have finally sorted out their worst accounting and compliance troubles and improved their feeble corporation governance.
Okay, so just as is like this signal saying one thing's wrapping up and another is about to begin.
Okay.
So we've got our bosses and boards, the folks in charge, and they've sorted out, dealt with, fixed their worst accounting and compliance troubles. Now, accounting troubles, think of that as problems with their financial records, their money stuff.
Yeah.
And compliance troubles are basically problems with following the rules, regulations. So they've cleaned up those messes, and they've also
improve their feeble corporation governance. Feeble just means weak, and corporation governance is how the company's managed at the top level.
Got it. So just when they think they've got everything under control.
Here comes the curveball. A new problem threatens to earn them, especially in America. The sort of nasty headlines that inevitably lead to heads rolling in the executive suite. Data insecurity.
Deep breath again. Okay, so in this part, the new problem is like the main character, and it threatens, meaning it's likely to cause trouble.
Yeah, it's about to unleash some chaos.
And to earn them, Nasty headlines. That basically means this problem could cause really bad press, especially in America.
Right, and that whole bit about nasty headlines that inevitably lead to heads rolling in the executive suite, that's some dramatic imagery.
Heads rolling.
Yeah, it's a vivid way of saying people are going to get fired, usually the top dogs, because executive suite refers to where the big bosses hang out.
And those firings are happening because of those bad headlines.
Exactly. The headline's about data insecurity, meaning not protecting digital information properly.
And there's that dash in the middle of the sentence.
Right. It's like a little pause for dramatic effect, like, wait for it. Here's what that new problem actually is.
Okay, I see. Second sentence of paragraph 1. Left, until now, to odd, low-level IT staff to put right, and seen as a concern only of data-rich industries such as banking, telecoms, and air travel, information protection is now high on the boss's agenda in businesses of every variety. Another monster.
They're not making it easy, are they? All right, we can handle this. Let's start with left until now to odd, low-level IT staff to put right. This is telling us who used to be in charge of dealing with data problems.
And it sounds like it wasn't the CEOs.
Nope. Odd here, it doesn't mean strange. It means more like not really considered important or just something we give to the newbies.
Okay. So it was left to the low-level IT staff to put right.
Exactly. Those junior folks in the IT department. And to put right just means to fix. So basically they were saying, hey, you new IT guys, deal with this data stuff.
And it was only considered a problem for
Data-rich industries such as banking, telecoms, and air travel. Companies swimming in data.
banks, phone companies, airlines. They had a lot to lose.
Right, so they paid more attention to information protection. But now everything's changed.
Because
The sentence goes on. Information protection is now high on the boss's agenda in businesses of every variety. Information protection, keeping data safe, that's our main subject now. And the big change, it's high on the boss's agenda. It's a top priority for managers in businesses of every variety.
all kinds of companies, not just those data giants.
Yep, and notice how the commas are used to slip in that extra info about how data protection used to be handled?
Sneaky commas. Okay, we've really broken down those sentences. Now let's look at some of the key words. We talked about sorted out, a common way to say something's been fixed.
Super common, yeah. Like, I finally sorted out my messy closet.
Nice. Then we have feeble, meaning weak.
Right, like a feeble attempt or a feeble excuse.
And threatens, meaning something's likely to cause problems.
Like, that storm cloud threatens to ruin our picnic.
Hopefully not. Nasty headlines are basically bad news stories.
Yeah, those attention-grabbing negative headlines you see in the news.
And heads rolling, that's a more colorful way of saying people are getting fired.
A very visual idiom. It implies that the firings are swift and maybe even a little bit dramatic.
Like something out of Game of Thrones.
Maybe not that extreme, but you get the idea. And remember, executive suite refers to those top-level offices.
Right. Then we have data insecurity itself, which just means not being safe with your digital information.
Not having proper protection in place.
Okay. And in that second sentence, there's that interesting use of the word odd.
Yeah, remember, in that context, it doesn't mean weird, but more like unimportant or not giving much attention.
And low-level IT staff are those junior employees in the IT department. Put right is just another way to say fix or correct.
We also talked about data-rich industries, those companies with tons of data, and gave examples like banking, telecoms, and air travel.
And the big takeaway from that sentence is that information protection is now super important for managers in all kinds of businesses.
Right, it's moved up to the top of the priority list. Understanding these individual words and how they all fit together in the sentences is like having the key to unlock the whole article.
All right, now let's see how all this helps us answer the first question about the text. The question is, the statement, "It never rains but it pours," is used to introduce A, the fierce business competition, B, the feeble boss-board relations, C, the threat from news reports, D, the severity of data leakage. So how do we approach this?
First, think about what comes right after that saying in the article. It talks about bosses dealing with old problems and then facing this new data insecurity problem, which could lead to bad news.
So A, the fierce business competition, that's not really what the sentence is setting up.
Right, the article's focusing on a new internal problem, not so much about competing with other companies.
And B, the feeble boss-board relations. That was something they were improving, not something new.
Exactly. And while C, the threat from news reports, is definitely mentioned, the saying itself is introducing the problem that causes those bad headlines, not the headlines themselves.
That leaves us with D, the severity of data leakage.
Which makes sense, right? The sentence connects solving those old issues with this new data insecurity problem that could have serious consequences.
Like people getting fired. So yeah, the severity of data leakage is a good fit. The saying sets the scene for this new big problem arriving just as things seem to be getting better.
Exactly. Like, oh, you think you're done? Think again. Here's a whole new mess to deal with.
On to question 2. It's about paragraph 2, which
Mhm.
talks about those recent data leaks. It says these events have left managers hurriedly peering into their intricate IT systems and business processes in search of potential vulnerabilities.
Mhm.
And the question asks, according to paragraph 2, some organizations check their systems to find out A, whether there's any weak point, B, what sort of data has been stolen, C, who is responsible for the leakage, D, how the potential spies can be located.
All right, let's focus on that phrase, in search of potential vulnerabilities.
Okay, potential means possible and vulnerabilities.
Weak points, flaws in their systems.
So they're basically looking for any cracks in their armor.
Exactly. And that matches perfectly with option A, whether there is any weak point. Vulnerability is just a fancy way of saying weak point.
Makes sense. Now, options B, C, and D, those might be important later on, but the paragraph specifically says they're checking for potential vulnerabilities right now. They're being proactive.
Right. They've seen what's happened to other companies, and they're scrambling to make sure they're not next.
Question 3 is about paragraph 3, which introduces this idea of GASP, generally accepted security practices, as being like gap for accounting. The question is, in bringing up the concept of GASP, the author is making the point that A, shareholders' interests should be properly attended to, B, information protection should be given due attention, C, businesses should enhance their level of accounting security, D, the market value of customer data should be emphasized.
Okay, so remember, the author mentions GASP after quoting Haim Mendelsohn, who talks about how valuable data is.
And how companies are responsible to their shareholders for protecting that value.
Right. Then Eli Noam suggests as GASP, emphasizing that security isn't just an IT thing, it's a management issue.
So while A, shareholders' interests should be properly attended to, and D, the market value of customer data should be emphasized, are definitely related ideas.
The GASP idea itself is about how to actually deal with data security. It's like saying, hey, we need clear standard rules for this, just like we have for accounting.
Which takes us to option B. Information protection should be given due attention.
Bingo. GSP is all about making information protection just as important and standardized as accounting.
And C, businesses should enhance their level of accounting security isn't quite right.
Because GSP is about overall data security, not specifically making accounting more secure. It's about creating a whole new set of standards.
Okay, on to question 4, which refers to paragraph 4. This is where the author is like, why don't these bosses get it?
Right. They're puzzled by the fact that some bosses don't see the connection between data leaks and losing trust.
And the question is, according to paragraph 4, what puzzles the author is that some bosses fail to get A, see the link between trust and data protection, B, perceive the sensitivity of personal data, C, realize the high cost of data restoration, D, appreciate the economic value of trust.
The paragraph literally says, surely it should be obvious that trust is easily destroyed and hugely expensive to restore, and that few things are more likely to destroy trust than a company letting sensitive personal data get into the wrong hands.
So it seems pretty clear that the author is confused as to why those bosses don't see the link between keeping data safe and maintaining customer trust. Option A all the way.
Exactly. The other options are definitely related. Understanding how sensitive personal data is, knowing how much it costs to fix things after a breach, valuing trust in business. But the author is specifically surprised by the lack of understanding of that fundamental connection. Like, hello, data breach equals broken trust.
Okay, last question. Question 5. It's about paragraph 5, which delves into the differences between how the U.S. and Europe handle data leaks.
It also mentions that new law in California, the possibility of federal laws, a big credit card data theft, and that warning from the FTC about stepping up data security.
The question asks, it can be inferred from paragraph 5 that A, data leakage is more severe in Europe. B, FTC's decision is essential to data security. C, California takes the lead in security legislation. D, legal penalty is a major solution to data leakage. So, lots to consider here.
Let's take them one by one. A, data leakage is more severe in Europe. We can't really say that for sure based on this paragraph.
It tells us Europe has penalties and America didn't, but not how many leaks actually happen in each place.
Right. Now, B, FTC's decision is essential to data security. That's a strong possibility. Remember, the paragraph says the FTC is putting corporate America on notice about regulating weak data security.
So what they do could really push companies to improve their data protection.
See, California takes the lead in security legislation. That's also likely.
They were the first ones to pass a law requiring companies to tell people if their data's been leaked.
Right, so they're definitely at the forefront of this issue in the US. And D, legal penalty is a major solution to data leakage. That's tricky.
The paragraph compares the lack of penalties in America to having them in Europe, but doesn't outright say it's the main solution. It might deter some companies, but
It's not a guaranteed fix. And the focus on the FTC suggests that regulatory pressure is another big factor.
so both B and C are reasonable inferences. But B feels a little stronger.
Yeah, because the FTC's action is on a national level, which could have a bigger and faster impact than one state's law.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground today. Before we wrap up, what are some things people might find tricky when reading articles like this?
Well, as we've seen, those long, complicated sentences can be a real headache.
Oh yeah, they're like linguistic marathons.
One thing that helps is to focus on finding the main subject, who or what the sentence is about, and the main verb, what they're doing. Once you've got that core, the rest starts to fall into place.
Like finding the skeleton of the sentence.
Exactly. And then there's vocabulary.
Ugh, those tricky words and phrases.
Yeah, things like idioms like, it never rains but it pours, or heads rolling, and those more formal words can be confusing. The best tip: look at the context. The words around the tricky word can often give you clues.
And if that doesn't work?
Look it up, but then make sure you understand how it fits back into the sentence.
Another thing that can be tricky is understanding how the different ideas in the article are connected.
Those linking words like just as, though, meanwhile, are crucial. They show the relationship between ideas, whether it's cause and effect, contrast, or something else. Pay attention to those.
And lastly, how do you know if you're understanding the article correctly or just making stuff up?
That comes down to careful reading and sticking to the text, especially when answering questions.
Don't go on wild goose chases.
Exactly. Base your answers on what the article actually says, not on your own assumptions.
So to sum up our deep dive into Text 11, data security is no longer just a tech issue.
It's a big deal for everyone, from the top bosses down.
It's about protecting valuable information, building trust with customers, and even navigating legal complexities.
And by breaking down those sentences, understanding those key words, and carefully analyzing the questions, we can really grasp the author's message.
Hopefully you can use these techniques to conquer any challenging text you come across.
Now, here's a final thought for you to ponder. As our world becomes more and more digital, how do we balance the need for easy access to information with the need for security? It's a question we'll all have to grapple with.
Lots to think about. Until next time, happy reading.